Remove the ribbon. She is not a Whitaker scholar. The principal's fingers closed around the navy satin pinned to Nia Brooks's red dress, and the whole auditorium seemed to inhale at once. Nia did not step back. She only lifted a wrinkled donor letter with both hands and pointed to the blue logo at the top. In the VIP row, Graham Whitaker's face changed before he understood why. 40 minutes earlier, Brookhaven Preparatory Academy still looked perfect from the outside. Rain had rinsed the brick walkways clean, the American flag snapped above the entrance, and gold letters on the glass doors promised excellence with integrity. Inside, the school auditorium smelled of floor polish, lilies, and the sharp citrus perfume Principal Margaret Ellison wore whenever donors were present. A forgotten carton of chocolate milk sat unopened beneath the first row, sweating against the carpet as if it had been placed there by a child who had been called away too quickly. Nia Brooks stood near the stage steps. Small and straight in a faded red dress her mother had ironed twice the night before. The hem was uneven by half an inch. Her black patent shoes had tiny scratches across the toes. Her hair was braided neatly with 2 white beads at the ends, the only new thing she wore. In her left hand, she held an envelope so tightly that the paper had softened at the corners. Every few seconds, her thumb moved over the logo printed at the top, as if checking that it was still real. On stage, other children laughed quietly in navy blazers and polished loafers. Their parents lifted phones, whispered names, adjusted collars. Nia's mother, Tasha, stood along the back wall in her laundromat uniform, one hand resting on her own wrist to hide the tremble. She had worked the closing shift the night before, taken 2 buses home, and stayed awake until after midnight pressing Nia's dress under the yellow kitchen light. She had told her daughter, "Stand tall, baby. Not because they let you in. Because you earned the room." In the front row sat Graham Whitaker, white, 54, and known in Atlanta as the man who could move a mayor's calendar with one phone call. His navy suit fit like it had been drawn onto him. His silver hair was combed back, his watch quiet and expensive, his security team posted near the side doors. Beside him, his attorney, Caleb Rhodes, scrolled through a tablet. Graham had funded the Whitaker Horizon scholarships for 8 years, but he rarely attended ceremonies anymore. He signed letters, approved reports, posed for one photograph, then returned to a silent stone mansion where his daughter's piano still sat closed. When Nia's name was called, she climbed the steps carefully, the donor letter folded inside her palm. Ms. Lena Morales, her teacher, smiled too brightly and pinned the navy ribbon over Nia's heart. For 1 second, Nia looked almost weightless. Then Principal Ellison glanced at Dean Howard Price near the curtain. He avoided her eyes and tapped a glossy program against his clipboard. The principal's smile disappeared. She stepped forward, took the microphone, and said the sentence that cut the room cold. "There has been a mistake." Nia looked up. "Ma'am," she whispered, "my name is on the letter." The principal reached for the ribbon anyway, and as the satin twisted loose from Nia's dress, the envelope slipped open just enough for Graham Whitaker to see a dark blue mark near the bottom corner, shaped exactly like the first stroke of his own signature. The mark was gone almost as soon as Graham saw it, hidden again when Nia folded the letter against her chest, but it had already lodged somewhere behind his ribs. It was not proof, not yet. It was only ink, a color, a curve, a familiar pressure of a fountain pen dragged too slowly across cotton paper. Still, Graham stopped moving. Principal Ellison held the loosened ribbon between 2 fingers, her smile stretched thin for the parents' phones. "Children sometimes misunderstand adult documents," she said into the microphone, soft enough to sound kind and loud enough to make Nia smaller. "This is a celebration, not a place for confusion." Nia's eyes moved from the ribbon to the letter, then to the front row where the white-haired man in the navy suit was watching her as if trying to remember a dream. She swallowed once. "My name is on that letter, ma'am." The room shifted, not loudly, but in dozens of small betrayals. A mother lowering her phone, a father leaning toward his wife, a teacher pressing her lips together. Somewhere near the stage curtain, Dean Howard Price's phone buzzed against his clipboard. He looked down for less than a second, but Nia noticed. She noticed because the same phone had buzzed that morning in his office after her mother refused to sign the paper. She noticed because grown-ups who were telling the truth did not check messages before answering children. "Nia," Ms. Morales whispered from behind the row of students, warning and begging at once. But Nia did not step back. She opened the letter with careful hands. The paper trembled, though her voice did not. It says full merit scholarship. It says donor-sponsored. It says Nia Brooks. Principal Ellison reached to take it. Nia pulled it back just 1 inch. Not rude. Not dramatic. Just enough to say no. A few people gasped at the tiny refusal. "I'm not giving it away," Nia said. "My mom said proof only helps if you keep it." At the back wall, Tasha Brooks closed her eyes for half a breath, the fluorescent light catching the name tag still pinned to her laundromat shirt. Graham heard the sentence differently than the others did. "Proof only helps if you keep it." He turned slightly toward Caleb Rhodes. "Do our direct scholarship letters say donor-sponsored?" His voice was quiet enough that no camera would catch it. Caleb looked up from the tablet, then at the paper in Nia's hands. "Sometimes," he said, "for special awards." "And the logo?" Graham asked. "Blue seal, upper left." Graham's gaze returned to the letter. In the aisle, the forgotten chocolate milk carton had tipped on its side, a pale brown line spreading silently into the carpet. Principal Ellison was still smiling, still speaking in polished phrases about policy and verification, but her left hand had tightened around the ribbon until the satin wrinkled. Then Nia pointed to the bottom of the page with one small finger and said, almost too softly for the microphone to catch, "That's the same blue as the man's pen." And Graham Whitaker realized the child had seen what every adult in the room was pretending not to see. For a moment, no one answered the child. The microphone carried only the soft crackle of static and the far-off sound of rain ticking against the auditorium windows. Then Dean Howard Price stepped forward with the careful patience of a man who had practiced calm in mirrors. "Mr. Whitaker," he said, turning slightly toward the VIP row, "this appears to be a documentation issue. We have the official program right here." He lifted a glossy booklet from his clipboard and handed it to Principal Ellison as if it were a court order. The principal opened it to the scholarship page, her finger moving down the printed names until she stopped on one line. "The Whitaker Horizons recipient listed for this year is Madison Vale." A soft rustle went through the room. Madison Vale, a blonde girl in a pressed white dress, stood 2 places behind Nia with her chin lowered and her hands folded so tightly her knuckles were pale. Her mother, Patricia Vale, sat in the front row wearing pearls and a cream coat that smelled faintly of gardenias even from the aisle. She did not look at Nia. She looked at Dean Price. Just once. Too quickly. But Nia saw it. Nia saw small things because small things were what poor people were left with when adults took the big things away. She saw the program in Principal Ellison's hand had been freshly printed, the pages still stiff, while the one Ms. Morales had given the students that morning had been folded in half and tucked into Nia's lunchbox beside a peanut butter sandwich. She still had it. Without speaking, Nia reached into the pocket of her red dress and pulled out the creased student copy. "Mine says my name," she said. Principal Ellison's smile twitched. "That was a preliminary version." "No, ma'am," Nia said, small but steady. "Ms. Morales gave it to us after breakfast." The clock in the cafeteria said 8:14. Ms. Morales looked up sharply. She remembered the clock because it had been slow all week. Graham's eyes moved from Nia to the glossy program, then to the creased one in her hand. He did not stand. He did not raise his voice. He only leaned toward Caleb and murmured, "Take a picture of both." Caleb lifted his phone just enough to capture the 2 pages. Dean Price's own phone buzzed again. This time, the screen faced outward for half a second before he turned it against his jacket. Graham caught only 2 words in the preview, from Patricia Vale. "Not here." The auditorium seemed colder after that. Principal Ellison cleared her throat and reached toward Nia's student program. "Let me see that, sweetheart." Nia held it closer. "You already have one," she said. And when Graham looked again at the glossy booklet in the principal's hand, he saw the print shop receipt still tucked between the pages, dated that morning at 8:37 a.m., 23 minutes after Nia said her copy had been handed out. The receipt sat between the glossy pages like something too small to matter and too sharp to ignore. Graham saw Caleb's thumb pause above the phone screen after the picture was taken, but before either man could speak, Principal Ellison closed the program with a gentle clap and turned toward the audience with the kind of smile used in expensive places to cover broken things. "We're going to take a brief pause," she announced. "Nothing to worry about. Our students deserve a smooth ceremony." Smooth. The word landed on Nia like a hand pressing her down without touching her. A side door opened, and she was guided out of the auditorium into the donor corridor, where framed plaques lined the walls and a glass case displayed silver trophies under white lights. Everything there looked polished enough to reject fingerprints. Rain slid down the tall windows in thin gray lines. From the teacher's lounge came the low murmur of a television no one was watching, some daytime host laughing too brightly about a recipe. Nia stood near a leather bench, still holding the donor letter and her folded student program. Her ribbon was no longer on her dress. Principal Ellison faced her with Dean Price on one side and a Brookhaven board member, Elaine Carver, on the other. Mrs. Carver wore a camel coat, diamond studs, and the patient expression of someone used to making poor people feel unreasonable. "Nia," she said, bending slightly but not enough to be kind, "this is a very grown-up matter. Sometimes adults have to correct paperwork so children are not embarrassed later." Nia looked at the glass trophy case instead of the woman's face. Her reflection looked smaller there, trapped between names engraved in gold. "I was embarrassed today," she said. The corridor went quiet. Dean Price gave a soft sigh, not angry, almost disappointed. "No one is accusing you of anything, sweetheart. But waving papers in front of donors creates confusion." He held out his hand, palm open. "Let us review the letter privately." Nia's fingers tightened. "No, sir." Elaine Carver's smile cooled. "That sounds like someone has told you not to cooperate." At the far end of the corridor, Graham had stopped near the doorway with Caleb beside him. A security guard stood 2 steps behind, silent, professional, ready to become a wall if needed. Graham heard enough to know the tone, but not enough yet to see the machinery underneath it. This was how power sounded when it did not have to shout. It sounded reasonable. It sounded concerned. It sounded like a door locking softly. Principal Ellison lowered her voice. "If your mother wants what is best for you, she will let us handle this with dignity." Nia finally looked up. "My mother has dignity," she said. "That's why she kept copies." For the first time, Dean Price's eyes moved to the folded student program in Nia's hand. Too fast. Too hungry. He withdrew his hand and adjusted his cuff. "Of course," he said. "Copies are helpful." But as he turned away, pretending the matter was under control, the glossy program slipped slightly under his arm, and Graham saw the print shop receipt again, this time with a delivery note stamped across the bottom. Rush order approved by H. Price, 8:22 a.m. Graham did not ask about the rush order in the hallway. He only looked at the receipt long enough for the name stamped at the bottom to settle into him, then turned to Caleb and said, "I want to see the original documents." Principal Ellison began to explain that school files were confidential, that procedures existed for a reason, that emotions were making a simple matter look ugly. Graham listened without blinking. "Not yours," he said. "Hers." By early evening, the black SUV was parked beneath a flickering lot light outside the apartment complex where Nia lived with her mother. No cameras followed. No school officials came. Rain tapped the windshield in soft, steady ticks before Graham stepped out into the smell of wet asphalt and dryer vents. The building hallway was narrow, with beige walls scraped by old furniture and a vending machine humming beside the stairs. Inside the apartment, the kitchen light buzzed faintly over a round table covered in folded mail. Somewhere behind a thin wall, an old washing machine knocked once, paused, then began shaking through another cycle. Tasha Brooks set a shoebox on the table as if it weighed more than paper. "I kept everything," she said. Her voice was tired, not ashamed. "Because people like me have to." Nia stood beside her, one hand on the shoebox lid and the other still holding the donor letter. She watched Graham carefully, as if deciding whether a rich man's apology could be trusted before it was spoken. Tasha laid out printed emails, bus receipts, the first program with Nia's name, and a pale yellow form with one line circled in pencil. Family Declines Award. I never signed that, Tasha said. They wanted me to. I said no. Caleb leaned closer, but Nia reached into the pocket of her red dress before he could touch the paper. She pulled out a cracked old phone wrapped in a rubber band. This was Grandma's, she said. Mom's phone ran out, so Mr. Price called this one when he thought she wouldn't answer. Graham looked at the phone. It was small, outdated, the kind sold near cash registers for people who needed minutes more than features. Nia pressed the screen with both thumbs until a saved voicemail opened. For a moment, there was only static. Then Howard Price's smooth voice filled the little kitchen. Mrs. Brooks, we can still avoid embarrassment tomorrow. Diane at Whitaker understands these substitutions happen when families can't comply with school expectations. Just sign the deferment and we'll keep your daughter's name out of any unpleasant discussion. The message cut off there, swallowed by a beep and a burst of silence. Graham did not move. The washing machine thudded again behind the wall. Diane Mercer, the woman who had run his foundation's education grants since Ava died. The woman who sent him clean reports, smiling photos, and neat sentences about impact. He looked down at Nia's donor letter, then at the old phone in her small hand, and for the first time that day, Graham Whitaker wondered whether Brookhaven had lied to him, or whether someone inside his own house of charity had helped them do it. The name Diane stayed in the kitchen after the voicemail ended, as if the old phone had released something colder than sound. Graham did not ask Nia to play it again. He did not apologize again. He only looked at the cracked screen, then at Tasha's shoebox, then at the donor letter lying carefully between them on the table. May my attorney copy that message? He asked. Nia looked at her mother first. Tasha nodded once, and only then did Nia slide the phone across the table. I don't want money for it, she said. Graham's eyes lifted. What do you want? The washing machine behind the wall slowed into a tired spin, metal knocking softly like a loose heartbeat. In the living room, a small television played with the volume low, blue light flickering across a stack of schoolbooks on the couch. Nia stood in that dim kitchen with the ribbon mark still wrinkled on her dress and said, I want them to stop making my mom look like she lied. No one spoke for a moment. Caleb transferred the voicemail to his secure device, photographed the form Tasha refused to sign, and scanned the bus receipts showing the dates she had gone to Brookhaven's office. Graham watched each document appear on Caleb's tablet, not as paperwork anymore, but as little walls a tired mother had built around the truth, because she knew no one powerful would believe her without proof. When they left, Graham told Tasha that no one from Brookhaven was to contact her without Caleb present. He said it calmly, almost gently, but it sounded less like advice than the first quiet lock being placed between her and the machine that had tried to grind her down. By 9:17 that night, Graham was back on the top floor of Whitaker Tower. Rain blurred the city lights beyond the glass. His office was dark except for the desk lamp and the glow of Caleb's laptop. Diane Mercer's reports sat in neat folders on the conference table, all cream paper and polished language. Impact, access, equity. Words that suddenly felt too clean. Graham called the foundation's night systems manager, a man named Paul Iverson who had worked for him since before Ava died. Paul, Graham said, voice low, pull every access log tied to Nia Brooks, Brookhaven Preparatory, and Diane Mercer. Do not notify grants. Paul did not ask why. Yes, sir. Caleb opened the scholarship portal. Nia's file appeared first as Diane had always presented it. Approved, funded, archived. Then Paul's access log arrived in an encrypted email. A second version of the file had been opened at 11:46 p.m. the night before the ceremony. 2 minutes later, a document titled Recipient Replacement Authorization had been uploaded from Brookhaven's administrative account. But the approval flag did not come from Brookhaven. It came from inside Whitaker Horizons, under Diane Mercer's credentials. Graham leaned back slowly. He remembered Diane standing beside him at Ava's Memorial Scholarship launch, holding a folder while cameras flashed, saying, I'll make sure every child is protected. For 8 years, he had believed her because believing her was easier than looking himself. Now he stared at Nia's name on the screen and understood that he had not only trusted the wrong person. He had mistaken distance for goodness. By morning, Graham had not slept, but nothing about him looked hurried. His tie was straight, his voice even, his face as controlled as the gray sky behind the windows of Whitaker Tower. At 8:05 a.m., Brookhaven's leadership arrived in the Foundation boardroom under the impression they had been invited to resolve a public relations concern before it touched the press. Principal Ellison came first, composed in a charcoal blazer. Dean Howard Price followed with a leather folder tucked beneath his arm. Diane Mercer entered last, carrying her own tablet and wearing the soft professional smile Graham had trusted for nearly a decade. No one expected Nia Brooks to be there. She sat beside her mother at the far end of the table, feet not quite touching the floor, the donor letter inside a clear plastic sleeve in front of her. Ms. Morales sat on Tasha's other side, hands folded tightly, as if she still expected someone to tell her she had spoken out of turn. On the ceiling, the small camera light blinked red. A pitcher of ice water stood untouched in the center of the table, beads of condensation running down the glass. Graham let the silence grow until people began filling it with their own discomfort. "We're here," Diane said gently, "to protect the child from further embarrassment." Nia looked down at the plastic sleeve. Graham did not look at Diane. "Dean Price," he said, "walk me through what happened." Price opened his folder smoothly. He explained that the Brooks family had been contacted, that school requirements had not been satisfied, that a replacement had been selected only after withdrawal. His language was clean, careful, almost kind. Then Graham turned to Diane. "And the foundation approved the replacement?" Diane's hand rested on her tablet. "Based on documentation received, yes. We rely on partner schools for family compliance." Caleb placed an unopened envelope on the table. No one touched it. "Nia," Graham said softer now, "you told Mr. Rhodes something about the voicemail." Nia glanced at her mother, then at the adults across from her. She did not perform confidence. She simply held onto the one small thing she knew. "Mr. Price said Diane at Whitaker understood substitutions," she said. "But on the letter it says direct donor award. Ms. Morales told us direct means nobody at school gets to switch it." Diane's smile did not vanish, but it stopped moving. Price gave a quiet laugh. "Children repeat words without understanding them." Graham nodded once as if considering that. Then he asked, "Would you mind saying that again?" Price blinked. "Excuse me? What you just said?" The camera light blinked again. Price's phone vibrated on the table, but he did not look down. "I only meant this is complicated," he said. "Not the same sentence," Nia whispered. The room stilled. It was such a child's observation, so simple and devastating. Graham leaned back, calm as winter. Caleb opened the envelope and slid out a transcript of the voicemail beside the access logs. Diane looked at the page, then at the red camera light, and for the first time her eyes moved past Graham to Nia, as if realizing the little girl at the end of the table was no longer standing alone. The transcript landed on the table without a sound, but everyone reacted to it as if it had cracked the glass. Diane Mercer read only the first few lines before her face tightened into the small, private expression of someone calculating how much truth could still be renamed. "A voicemail does not prove misconduct," she said. Her voice remained soft. "That made it worse. It proves a school employee used my name inappropriately." Dean Price nodded too quickly. "Exactly. I was trying to reassure a parent. Perhaps I used Diane's name in a casual way." Nia looked at him, then down at the donor letter in its plastic sleeve. "No," she said. It was barely more than breath, but the room heard it. Graham turned to her. "No what?" Nia slid her finger beneath the edge of the sleeve, not removing the letter, only lifting the bottom corner where the paper had been folded so many times the crease had gone soft. "There was another paper," she said. "The one he wanted my mom to sign. It had this letter copied behind it, but the bottom was cut off." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "The signature line?" Nia shook her head. The sentence under it. The sentence. Graham felt something in his chest go very still. Caleb connected his laptop to the boardroom screen and opened the phone backup he had made from the old device. The file list appeared grainy and small, a clutter of photos Nia's grandmother had never deleted. Grocery prices, bus schedules, a blurry picture of Nia holding a spelling certificate. Nia leaned forward and pointed. That one. Caleb opened the image. It was crooked, taken from a child's height in Brookhaven's finance office. Tasha's hand was visible at the edge, palm flat on a desk. Dean Price's silver pen lay beside a form. Beneath the form was a partial copy of the donor letter, and at the bottom, in blue ink, was Graham's handwritten note, captured clearly enough to read. For the girl who wrote about waiting under the bus stoplight. G.W. The room emptied of air. Graham did not speak. He stood looking at the screen, at the words he had written after midnight months ago, when Ava's old desk lamp had been the only light in his study and Nia's essay had made him stop halfway through a stack of applications. He remembered the sentence in her essay about counting headlights because her mother's bus was late. He remembered choosing her. Not a category. Not a report. Her. And then he remembered every foundation update Diane had sent him afterward. Every clean paragraph saying partner schools had confirmed successful placement. Every photo of smiling children arranged beneath banners with his family name. He had thought distance made him efficient. It had made him blind. Diane's tablet chimed once on the table. No one moved toward it. Caleb zoomed in on the image. Below the handwritten line, a second document edge showed through. Recipient replacement authorization, already dated the night before Tasha was asked to sign anything. Dean Price's mouth opened, then closed. Diane looked at Graham, but he was no longer looking at her. He was looking at Nia, the child who had kept a blurry old phone photo because some part of her understood adults might cut off the truth and still call it paperwork. Graham Whitaker went pale. For several seconds, he could not speak at all. Then he reached forward, took the plastic-sleeved donor letter in both hands, and placed it flat at the center of the boardroom table. His voice, when it came, was quiet enough to make everyone lean in. Lock every account Diane Mercer can touch. No one moved at first. Diane Mercer's tablet kept glowing beside her hand, but she did not reach for it. Caleb did. He picked it up, powered it down, and slid it into an evidence envelope while Graham stood at the head of the table with the donor letter flat before him. His face had regained its color, but not its softness. This foundation will not issue another dollar through Brookhaven until an independent audit is complete, he said. Dean Price, Principal Ellison, you will leave this building with Mr. Rhodes's written notice in your hands. Diane, your access ends now. Diane opened her mouth, perhaps to remind him of loyalty, grief, 8 years of service. But Graham looked at her with such quiet disappointment that the sentence died before it became sound. By noon, the board had been called. By 3, Brookhaven's scholarship accounts were frozen. By Friday, Howard Price and Margaret Ellison had been suspended pending investigation. Diane Mercer had been terminated for cause, and the foundation's attorneys had sent formal notices requiring every diverted scholarship dollar to be traced, returned, and reported. Patricia Vale's building donation was separated from all student awards, and Madison, who had done nothing but stand in a dress chosen by adults, was protected from public blame. Graham insisted on that. Children do not pay for the ambition of grown-ups, he told the board, and for once no one in the room corrected his language into something prettier. The second ceremony happened 1 week later in the same auditorium, but it no longer felt like the same place. The velvet ropes were gone. The back doors were open. Cafeteria workers, janitors, bus drivers, teachers, parents, and students filled the rows where only donors had sat before. Tasha Brooks stood beside Nia near the stage steps, wearing a blue dress Ms. Morales had helped her choose and the same steady eyes she had worn in her laundromat uniform. A legal advocate from the foundation stood nearby, not hovering, just present, there to make sure no one could turn paperwork into a weapon again. Graham did not make a long speech. He announced the Ava Direct Promise Line, a system that gave every scholarship family a direct confirmation number, a real person to call, legal review for disputes, and written protection from school-level substitutions. He also announced that Tasha would be paid for the hours she lost fighting the false withdrawal and offered a full-time position in the Foundation's Family Liaison Office if she wanted it, not as charity, but because she already knew how to protect documents better than people with offices and titles. Then he stepped back. He did not pin the ribbon on Nia. He handed it to Tasha. The auditorium watched as Nia's mother fastened the navy satin over the red dress, right where it had been pulled away. Nia held the old phone in one hand and the sealed donor letter in the other. When she reached the microphone, she had to rise on her toes. "I kept the phone," she said. "Not because I wanted anyone in trouble. Because my mom told the truth, and I wanted it to have a place to stay." Graham looked down, and for a second the billionaire